Welcome to the Rent to Rent Success podcast, all about creating consistent cash flow, escaping the 9-to-5, and really living life on your terms. This is the only podcast entirely dedicated to helping you achieve rent to rent success. It's our place to inspire each other to believe bigger, to be bolder, and to be game changers for good. I'm Stephanie Taylor, your guide on this exciting ride. Let's start up the engines and get ready to fly. Hello. Stephanie here, and welcome to the 12th episode of the Rent to Rent Success podcast, which is all about how to tenant a property in coronavirus lockdown. If you listened to episode 11 about why there's now more opportunity, but you thought to yourself, well, of course it's easier to get a property because there are no tenants. Well, this is the episode for you. Before we dive in, I want to take a minute to thank you for your reviews. I'm so encouraged. And if you haven't left a review yet, please do leave a review and a few words on Apple Podcasts. We're also giving to our charities for each review that you leave. I know it's a little bit fiddly to leave the Apple review, so we really appreciate you if you can do that. So, how can you tenant a property in lockdown? And how can you take advantage of all the opportunities that are there that we talked about in episode 11. As I'm recording this, the end of June 2020, we've seen the lifting of lockdown for the property market in England and Wales, and restaurants, cafes, and so on are expected to reopen next month. And we're seeing different dates being announced in England, Wales, and Scotland. What we're finding in our area is that demand is much increased. So when lockdown started on the 23rd of March, we had a few people who were scheduled to move into our properties, and they moved in. We also had some people scheduled to move in who had taken on new jobs, but found their jobs were no longer available and didn't move in. And then nothing. Well, almost nothing. We over the lockdown period, we continued to get inquiries, but only a fraction of what we would normally expect to receive. It was very sporadic interest, has continued throughout the lockdown, but interest levels have increased significantly since the easing of the lockdown measures recently. And we're based in Wales, and Wales is a little bit behind the lockdown in terms of the lockdown easing measures. And we're still not quite back to pre-COVID demand, but we are starting to fill rooms again. So it's feeling really positive. But let's just say, for the example of this episode, that you're negotiating a property and you're just not sure whether you can fill it or not. So here's what I suggest. Offer a lockdown rent. Before I explain what I mean by that, I just want to explain the context. So normally, as a renter, you would be offering a guaranteed rent to the landlord. And then at the moment, the government is restricting the ability of people to move, so you're unable to operate your business as you normally would. And in that context, some landlords and agents would be open to an arrangement where you pay a different amount of rent at the start during lockdown, and then you revert to the full rent after lockdown. So using that strategy, it means you could take a property on now, manage it through the lockdown, and then have it cash flow fully for the rest of the term. And as a side note, just to let you know that our solicitor has added new clauses to our contracts now. Let's call them the Corona clauses, so that if anything like this happens again in the future and our ability to operate is impacted severely, we'll be able to renegotiate the rent accordingly as part of the contract. And I'll put a link to more information about the contracts in the show notes, which are at rentsuccess.com/12. That's rentsuccess.com/12 for episode 12. Okay, so once you have a property, you've agreed a rent, you've made a special arrangement to cover the lockdown period. How do you fill the rooms? Well, there are regional differences, but usually one of these will work if you have got empty properties. So, in addition to the normal advertising through Spare Room and the other online portal, you can try some of these depending on what your location is. So, the NHS obviously need accommodation, supermarkets and fulfillment centres like Amazon. Local authorities for emergency housing. This is a big one. It's a bit of a slow burn though, because you do need to develop those relationships with the council, but it's worth persisting with that. If that's a road you'd like to go down. Then there are charities that support vulnerable or at-risk groups who may need housing. And then there are recruitment agencies who are filling those key worker roles. And loads of people have had really good success with working with these groups, and that has sustained them through lockdown. We chose not to because a lot of our properties were partially tenanted with young professionals, and we didn't feel that it was appropriate to bring in high risk key workers or very vulnerable people. It just needs to be the right mix for the properties.
So, are you ready to take the next step? Maybe you still have unanswered questions. We've got you. You can get your free rent-to-rent success guide at rent2rentsuccess.com/guide. That's rentsuccess.com/guide. It'll guide you through what rent-to-rent is all about and whether it's right for you. Now, let's get back to the podcast.
So, yeah, as we ease out of lockdown, some of your properties might be partially tenanted, or you might even be in the wrong location, because we were contacted for one empty property that was new on, and it was just in the wrong location for the person was recruiting from a recruitment agency, recruiting for a hospital, and that specific property was in the wrong location. So if you've got partially tenanted properties, or your properties are in the wrong location for the groups that I just mentioned, what to do then is just to work on the fundamentals to ensure that you can fill your rooms as quickly as you can. You can always sell a product at the right price, and you just need to ensure that your rooms, your products are as good as they can be and that they fit the price that you're charging. And the way to just check over whether you're doing everything you can is what I call poetry. It's the 6 things to fill your rooms faster. So the P is for photos, and you need to check they're not letting you down. It's often the photos that are the most important thing for an online ad. O is for online portals, especially Spare Room. You need to be showing up amazing on the portals. E is for existing tenants. Let them know and incentivize them as well to make referrals. T is for tell everyone, both online and offline, that you have these lovely rooms available. R is for rooms beautifully presented, and that's just to dress your rooms for success. And Y is your viewings and the process that you go through to help more people to say yes at a viewing. And I'll talk more about the poetry in a future episode. So this is a great time now to ensure that you're good with all this and that you're on your game with everything. So what we found is that after a few very quiet weeks, we filled a lot of empty rooms quickly when demand returned because other agents were not responding. So again, you can do well just by showing up. So to summarize, if you're taking on a property during lockdown, and there will be lots of opportunities to be able to do that, ensure your contract includes a corona clause. Negotiate a special arrangement for the lockdown period. Fill your rooms faster by using the poetry method. And where you have empty properties, there are lots of ways to find tenants, for example, key workers, and working with the council like we've talked about. And for those of you, if you've got your existing properties, you had them before lockdown, just ensure that you have all your poetry elements in place. Look after your existing tenants really well, as you always do, and claim the financial support that you can as well. So I just want to run over the financial support that's available for you. And you can just look into this and see what's appropriate to you. I know that a lot of people are nervous about taking loans, and that's fair enough. Don't take a loan if you don't feel that you need a loan or that you don't feel that you'll be able to pay the loan back. But there are some grants as well. So first of all, there's the government. These are the government initiatives. So you've got the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme, aka furlough. There's statutory sick pay. There's business rates relief, and that is a grant if you've got business rates, if you've got offices with business rates. And there's lots of different supports for self-employed, and you can see those on the government's website. Then there's the government-backed loans to business, that they're called including the business bounce back loans. Then there are some direct business grants. There's the VAT referral for rent to rent. We don't need to think of, well, that doesn't really apply because rent is 0 rated. And there's improved time to pay arrangements for your tax. And then one interesting thing that is worth looking up is that regional and local council specific initiatives. A lot of councils are offering additional grants, funding, hardship loans, and special council tax arrangements. So it really is worth checking in with your local council or regional council to find out what's on offer there if you're in hardship. And of course, there's universal credit, which has been increased, and also extend the eligibility extended. So as we go through all this, I just say, remember that your deal is usually there for 5 years. And if you structure them well using our deal analyzer, you've got some fat in your deal. You've got some allowances baked in. So to help you protect your profit margin, you can actually get through a few lean months. And I'll put a link to more information about the deal analyzer in the show notes, which are at renttoRentSuccess.com/12. That's rent number 2, success.com/12 for episode 12. And I know that a lot of what we talk about on these episodes might just seem like theory. And you're wondering, but does this really work in practice? And if you want to see how real people are dealing with coronavirus in their rent-to-rent businesses, people who've started businesses relatively recently, then do join us in Rent-to-Rent Real Talk every Wednesday at 8 p.m. And that's in our Rent-to-Rent Success Secrets Facebook group. We would love to see you there. And in the group, you can catch up with the amazing stories of real people who are running rent-to-rent business. And they're going to be talking about the reality of really running their businesses. And I'll make sure that the links for you are all in the show notes as well. Okay, so now you've filled your rooms. And next week, I'm going to talk to you about the other thing that people worry about. What about if your tenants can't pay? So until next week, have a great rest of the week. And remember, believe bigger, be bolder, and be a game changer.
Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like the links for anything mentioned in today's episode, or if voice is not enough and you want to see us on video too, you can find all the show notes and lots more at renttoRentSuccess.com. That's rent number 2, rentsuccess.com. If you've enjoyed today's episode, we'd super appreciate it if you would take a few minutes to review it in your podcast app. Remember, we'll be donating to our B1G1 charities too for each review you give. Until then, believe bigger, be bolder, be a game changer.